Welcome back to WCCF Tech TV, everyone. This is Keith once again, and today we're talking about the Ryzen 5 2400G, or rather, what happens when you've had this long enough and you've decided it's time to upgrade to a full-blown dedicated GPU. So what we are doing here is from the perspective of someone who had the CPU and had a 1080p monitor, because that's likely what you put together with this system with using the integrated Vega 11 graphics. So we put it on, yes, I know it's an X370 board, but we put it on the X370 X-Power Gaming Titanium just because it was convenient and I had the DisplayPort to test. So paired up with 16 gigs of DDR4 3200, that's the Evo X RGB RAM, and the latest drivers at the time of filming, we compared the dedicated GPU, or the iGPU rather, whoops, doesn't have a dedicated GPU. So the integrated graphics to pairing up with various dedicated graphics cards. So let's run through that line of graphics cards that we tested. So we have the Sapphire RX 460, the Sapphire RX 570, the GTX 1060 6 gig, the RX 480 8 gig, the GTX 1060 6 gig, the GTX 1070, Vega 64, the liquid-cooled variant, because that's the one we have, and the GTX 1080. Now the idea here is to see across a handful of titles, even and one synthetic, to see what perspires. So how much of a benefit you get from each. So one of the things we did was we left the Vega 11 at its stock GPU speed, so 1250 megahertz on that core. All of the video cards are going to be run at their default settings, so nothing was changed, nothing was overclocked, no power limits were adjusted. So everything was left stock so that we have a out-of-the-box kind of experience with all of these. So let's jump into the benchmarks to see kind of what came out of them. Now, as we get into the graphs, you'll notice that they're not listed, they're separated by Radeon and GeForce, because I didn't want this to turn into a Radeon versus GeForce kind of video, but rather if you were looking to upgrade, which one of the, what performance would the card you look to get you. So starting things off with TimeSpy, we're taking the overall rating to see the difference in what each graphics card makes. You can see Vega 11 is quite a bit behind everything else in here, as expected. And you see going all the way up to Vega 64, the benefit of that GPU in DX12 does show here. And you can see kind of how things scale. There's a fairly linear growth curve, except for the 570 to the 480, not a whole lot of difference there. But jumping into the first game, we were looking at Far Cry 5. And Far Cry 5 was tested at the high preset, which is why the average FPS at 1080p was so low on the Vega 11, but that's fine. This is just to see growth, like what kind of bump you're going to get. You can see here that this game does love the Radeon GPUs, and it shows in the results. And something throughout here that's fairly consistent, something I want you to take a look at, is that RX 570 to the RX 480 performance difference. And yes, I know the 580 is around, but that's a whole different ball of yarn, and we don't have one, so we're testing with the 480. So you can see the growth from one card to the next is quite nice. You can see the 1066 gig going to the 1070 is quite a jump. Not a whole lot of jump from the 1070 to the 1080. Now, jumping into Shadow of War at very high 1080p settings, we see Vega 11 still very low, but moving up to the 460 doesn't really get you a whole lot of benefit in this title. However, going to the 570 jumps it up quite a bit. And again, small growth from 570 to the 480, and Vega 64 is way out ahead of the rest of the Vega cards, or the Radeon cards rather. And you see a good growth curve over on the NVIDIA side of things. Seeing the 1066 gig go up nearly 50%, going from the 1066 gig up to the 1070. So that's nice to see. And the last game that we looked at was Grand Theft Auto 5, because a lot of people still do play this, and it's more of an older title to see how it fares with older games. So you can see well, good growth over on the GeForce side of things, but we ran into a bit of a problem with the Radeon cards. You'll notice that the 570 and up carry the exact same 0.1% lows and 1% lows, while the average does grow quite a bit, and that was good to see. But those average the 1%, 0.1% lows showed a bit of a stutter in that title, and the CPU was hitting 100% utilization. So probably a little bit of an overclock would help on there. It's just something to keep in mind. It was Admittedly, two of these games do tend to favor the Radeon cards, and one favors the GeForce cards, but that really wasn't intentional. It just kind of noticed it as we were doing that. But that just shows you the growth over which card, kind of see where your money's best to stop, because you can, the growth curve is like this, and then it kind of peters out. So just something to keep in mind. I just wanted to bring this video to you guys to show you what to expect when you decided to upgrade that CPU. Now, overclocking the CPU could benefit some of these higher end cards, but because it doesn't really overclock very much, we wanted to leave it alone at its stock configurations. So if this video was informative or helpful to you guys out there with a 2400G or even the 2200G, I know we didn't test that one, but kind of gives you an idea of what to expect with Raven Ridge when upgrading. Something I do want to take note of was a substantial amount of blue screens throughout the testing. Now, the game results were very consistent, but sitting at the desktop ever so rarely, or quite often, it would actually just cut to a blue screen in between tests and then sometimes on boot. So that was really weird and quite a bit of a pain. But other than that, everything went swimmingly, and that's all we have for you today. This has been Keith with WCCF Tech TV, and we'll catch you all in the next video.